On today's show, the Heat have won 7 straight. We'll tell you if people were too quick to write them off and if they should be considered in the top tier of contenders in the Eastern Conference. Plus, the Thunder handle the shorthanded Warriors, what the game taught us about both teams. All of that and more coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However you might be tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We'll get to the Warriors-Thunder game in a bit. Plus, we'll get to which player's impact has been the hardest to measure so far this season. But we'll start in Miami, where the Heat beat the Brooklyn Nets 122-115. Jimmy Butler scores 36 points, and the Heat have now won an NBA best 7 in a row after a 1-4 start and are now 1.5 games out of first place in the East, in case you were not paying attention. So before we zoom out on what this actually means for the top of the East, Adam, what was your takeaway from this game?
Jimmy Butler is the most interesting person on earth, the most interesting basketball player to ever play the game. There are nights, and I don't know if it was national television, I don't know what it was, but there are nights where he looks like the best player in the world, and they don't come often. But when they happen, you watch him and you go, my God, this guy does everything. 36 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 3 blocks, 12 of 19 shooting. He even hit 2 of 5 threes. He did literally every positive stat he looked great in tonight. And then when you watch the game, he just looked like the baddest dude. That run he had, I don't remember if it was the second or third quarter, Wes, you have to remind me, but the run he had where I think he had 10 or 12. Third quarter, 10 or 12
points in the third quarter, 11 in a row.
11 in a row, and it wasn't a quiet 11. It wasn't like cutting to the basket outlet, it caught an outlet. It was a very, very loud 11. He's fascinating, and tonight is the reasons why.
The third quarter was the quarter that blew the game open for Miami, and it was all, like you said, behind Jimmy Butler. The three-point shooting is something that I want to focus on with him. He took 5 3-pointers in this game, missed his first 2, because Brooklyn was baiting him into it. The first 4.5 minutes of this game were really ugly for Miami. That one made field goal, and I'm kind of watching this. I'm like, Brooklyn's flattening them out on offense. They're forcing them into being a jump shooting team, which is not what the Heat want to be. And I'm like, this is going to go south real quick. And that's not what happened. They leaned into Jimmy Butler getting early post position. They leaned into some more pick and roll stuff, and they ended up breaking Brooklyn's defense, getting them into rotation, getting the shots that they wanted. And then Jimmy Butler took over in the third quarter, like you mentioned. But Jimmy takes those those pair of 3-pointers early in the game because Brooklyn's baiting him into them, misses both. And he had been shooting 50% from 3 up until this game. I think he only taken like 8. He was like 9 of 18, so it wasn't on a big sample. But he missed the first 2. He comes back in that third quarter, hits 2 in a row, flashes the 5-0 hand sign to the Heat bench, letting everybody know, okay, I was under my 50%. Now I'm back to 50%. He is keeping track in his mind. And you know what? It's the kind of stat padding that I am totally here for. I love it because it's also really important to Jimmy Butler's game and to the Miami Heat offense, because later in that third quarter, what happens? Jimmy Butler, right wing, ball above the break. Royce O'Neal not giving him the 6 feet of space, playing up on him in his chest. Jimmy Butler jabs to his left, jukes him out, goes to the right, wide open dunk baseline. And that only happens because Royce O'Neal was playing up on him and gave him all that space behind him. And Jimmy Butler has quick enough of a first step to get by him and get that open dunk. That's the kind of thing that can result in for Jimmy Butler when he starts taking those threes. He's taken more threes this year than he ever has in a Miami Heat uniform, and I think it's a big part of his game. It's not like a big part of his game, but it's a bigger part of his game than it has been.
But this is what I love is, to me, this is like Larry Bird taking left-handed shots in a game to keep himself interested. He's just going to try to shoot 50% this year from 3, just as an extra challenge. Just as an extra thing to do here. And I love that your point there about 18 threes, and then tonight he takes 5. That's just, he has a mastery of the competitive aspect of the game. And that's really what this comes down to. There's the talent aspect, the athleticism and the gifts and the skills and that. And then there's just this like will part of it. And he's mastered the will part of it, honestly. And I really think it's why the Heat made it to the finals last year and keep outperforming expectations, is the talent gap can be whatever it is, but they're going to win the competitive gap. And I actually think that the reason they lost the finals was Denver matched them in the competitive gap, and then we're more, more talented.
Right.
So to me, it's all Jimmy Butler. And on nights like tonight, it was just, we might not remember this game, Wes. Like this might not make it into the archives of Jimmy Butler lore, but it was such a quintessential Jimmy Butler game, and that's what I liked it. I do want to ask you though, you were talking about the change with Highsmith coming into the starting lineup, and that's part of what has sparked it. I mean, you've been watching this team closely. What is it about that move, and what is it about the Heat that have got them on this run?
Well, they haven't lost a game with Haywood Highsmith in the starting lineup, and previous to Highsmith taking the power forward spot, it was Kevin Love in that power forward spot. And when it's Kevin Love, I know what they're trying to do. He's a floor spacer. He's a rebounder. He's another big body to add in the front court with Bam, who isn't the biggest body at the center spot to begin with. But it doesn't really work because you also had Tyler Hero at the time before the sprained ankle, now Duncan Robinson and Kyle Lowry. That's 3 minus defenders. Lowry at 37 years old is not the defender he was in like the 2019 Raptors run.
Right.
So that's 3 minus defenders. That's just, even with Jimmy and Bam, that's so hard to cover up. And if you just take one out and add Highsmith, who's arguably Miami's 3rd best defender, 4th at worst at this point.
But he is a good defender. You say that almost like it's ironic, but he's got that enormous wingspan. Yeah. He's got quick hands. Like, he's a pretty good defender.
I say it only because I don't know that a lot of people know who Haywood Highsmith is.
Okay, all right.
Like it's like, hey, like this guy you never heard of might be one of Miami's best 3 defenders, and so you add him to a front court with Jimmy and Bam, and now all of a sudden you're able to do all these different things defensively. You're able to switch everything if you want to. And you go from 3 negative defenders, which is impossible to cover up for, with 2, which is a little bit easier. And Kyle Lowry is so smart that he basically covers up for himself. So that to me is the biggest reason why Miami's gone on this 7-game stretch, plus Jimmy Butler, who did not play at all in the preseason, kind of finding his footing, getting into regular season shape here. And that much has been obvious, 30+ points in 2 straight games for Jimmy. But the Heat are 8-4 now. The Celtics are 9-2. The Sixers are 8-3. So the Heat are a game behind Philadelphia and a game and a half behind Boston here in the Eastern Conference. They are a half game up against over the Pacers, who are 4th, and the Milwaukee Bucks are there at 5th with the same record at 7-4. When we went into,
really quickly, equally as importantly, 2-0 in the in-season tournament. They have a chance here too. I know it sounds funny, but come on, like at this moment, the Heat winning the in-season tournament to me is the funniest outcome.
It would be the most Miami Heat thing.
Of course,
this random trophy that you put out here that means nothing. We're gonna go win that just because it's a competitive thing for us to do.
Yeah,
I'm here for it. I'm rooting for it. So look. We went into the season. The Bucks got Damian Lillard. The Celtics made all their offseason moves. Those 2 teams are considered the top 2 teams in the East, and then it's everybody else. I think what the season has taught us is that Milwaukee still has some work to do. Boston is a machine for the most part. Philadelphia is better than we probably gave them credit for because we were sort of distracted by the shiny James Harden object over here. and the Miami Heat, who were in the finals last year, and off to a stumbling start, 1-4 to start the season, 7 games in a row now. They're right there. Should we consider them in that top tier with the Bostons and the Philadelphias? And we can even throw Milwaukee in there if you want to.
I mean, absolutely not. But that's just perfect, right? Like they're exactly where they belong, Wes. Which is I'm half. When you talk about Jimmy Butler shooting 50%, exactly 50%, and being proud of this, I half think everything the Heat do is deliberate. And I almost would say, I don't really believe this, but I would almost say, like, okay, they come out the gate, they win the first game, and they drop 3 in a row. Everybody kind of like, okay, the first week of the season, you make notes and you categorize everyone. They are somehow under the radar at 8-4, perfectly under the radar. They couldn't have scripted a better season for themselves so far to be positioned at 8-4, and yet nobody really kind of knowing it yet. So for me, do they belong in that tier? No, because if we're being realistic, they still have a talent gap, one that existed for the last several years. But if you're telling me right now that when they match up with the Milwaukee Bucks next week in the in-season tournament for the chance to punch a ticket to go, who I'm taking, of course I'm taking the Miami Heat.
They can't be counted out. I won't put them in that top tier, just like you. It's unfair to do that to them and to the teams in front of them. Like, the talent gap is a real one, but as they've shown 3 to the last 4 years, basically, that doesn't totally matter until you get to a certain point. I still think that there might have some moves to make. by the trade deadline, but that's not
Are you real quick? Are you a Zach LaVine guy? Are you in?
I like Zach LaVine. I don't like him for the Heat.
Okay, I didn't know if that was you were alluding to that move specifically.
Not necessarily. Maybe a different Chicago Bulls guard, but it's the same Chicago Bulls guard that like every fan base wants on their team. So
that's true. That's true.
Whatever.
You know what though, Caruso, he is a Miami Heat guy. That's a Heat culture guy through and through,
isn't he? What did we learn about the Thunder in their win over the shorthanded Warriors? That's coming up next year on Locked On Heat or Locked On NBA. Talking so much heat there. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by BetterHelp. This time of year can be a lot, and it's natural to feel some sadness or anxiety about it, but adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot amid all of the stress and change, something to look forward to make you feel grounded, and to give you the tools to manage everything going on. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself, and it isn't just for those who've experienced a major trauma. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is also brought to you by Game Time. Look, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Tickets are easy to find and easy to find for every event in your area. Plus, they include views from all the seats in the venue, lowest price guarantee. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show you your total up front so you know you're getting a great deal without the hidden fees that they lump on at the end. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. I've done this for countless Miami Marlins games. I'll just buy them in like the second inning when they get their cheapest. It's just a great way to go. Find exclusive flash deals, sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories from the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. The Thunder took care of business, beating the Warriors in San Francisco 128-109, although it did not include Steph Curry, who's hurt, and Draymond Green, who's serving the first game.
Where's he? Where'd he go?
5 games suspended.
Suspended? What? What happened?
Ask Rudy Gobert. Oh, wait, no, his larynx doesn't work anymore.
Oh, man.
The Thunder had 6 players scoring double digits in this game. It was a weird game again without Steph or Draymond. Got a little iffy there in the third quarter, but the Thunder pulled away. What was your takeaway from this one?
This one was like another. We've had a lot of these this year, the fake close games where Oklahoma City really blew the Warriors out twice in this game, once in the first half and then again in the fourth quarter. My takeaway is that the Warriors to me are a team that my takeaways are more Warriors driven. And here's the thing. Oklahoma City looked great. They should be the story. I want to get back to them and make sure we spend some time. But my takeaway is that I look at this Warriors team and I go, okay, you're shorthanded to begin with. And the guys that you have filling in are so inconsistent and so unreliable when you talk about your Kumingas. Pods, I know, has had some good games tonight, maybe not so much. But then even the staples of the team, Klay Thompson, 1 of 10 tonight, he looked really bad. Andrew Wiggins, 12.6 rebounds, just kind of looks like the basketball life has been zapped out of him. So I look at this Warriors team and I go, in years past, maybe you could survive a little bit, go 2-6 if you're missing your key players for a little bit. The backups can go in there 3-3, something like that. Right now, I look at it and I go, I don't know how many games this team's going to win without Draymond and Steph, if any.
I mean, the Klay Thompson shooting slump to start the season is troubling, and he has had shooting slumps to start seasons a couple of times before. The difference is that those teams had Steph. One of those teams had Kevin Durant also on it. And it hadn't been a problem, but this is not the same team. It's not as talented. Klay Thompson's not as good as he used to be, even though he's still a very good player when those threes are going in, but he can't do the other things that Klay Thompson used to be able to do to make an impact on the game. So when he goes 1 for 10, the way he did tonight, it's a problem. And Chris Paul, it just, he went 4 of 8 tonight, 8 assists. Like, it's fine. It's tidy, but it's not really what you want when 2 of the stars are out. You kind of want them to just do a little bit more and not necessarily be trying to set up like Dario Saric all the time, And so,
I mean, to me, I think that's what Chris Paul is now. I almost don't expect him to do more than that. If you're looking for guys to take over, I mean, you just need a Klay and you need a Wiggins. You need those guys to be more than they are. And Wiggins, when I say the basketball life being zapped out of him, I mean, that's what I mean. He looks like a guy, and we know that he's had a little bit of a slump to start the year, but it's more than a slump. It's just more of the way he plays. I thought he had that year a couple years ago. He was phenomenal. He was exactly what they needed. It was a spirited performance. And I kind of thought, he turned a page. He's found the next chapter of his career, and this is who he is. And he's going to become maybe the next Andre Iguodala. He's going to become the next guy who was a bad star and all of a sudden an elite role player. And it was a one-off year. And now you watch him and you go, he just looks to me like a guy that doesn't want this, which is weird to say.
I mean, it doesn't look good, right? When this team, and you got Andrew Wiggins on the floor, Klay Thompson, Chris Paul, and this team ends up like kind of riding Jonathan Kuminga down the stretch here. Right. I mean, especially in that big third quarter comeback. You mentioned that the Thunder had to blow them out twice. They were up by, I think it was 16 points early in the game. The Thunder make this comeback. They pull within 84-83 after Kuminga's free throws. The Warriors do, yeah. It's a 1-point game with 2:46 left in the third quarter. Here's what the Thunder do after this. Isaiah Cho makes an assisted three-pointer. SGA makes an assisted three-pointer, which was wide open. And when you talk about players not wanting to play basketball, it didn't look like anybody wanted to play defense on that possession. Chet Holmgren hit some free throws. Chet Holmgren has a cutting dunk. And then just like that, within basically a minute and a half, 1:05 left in the third quarter, the Thunder go from up 1 to up 9, 94-85, and then they just go from there. They end up opening up a double-digit lead again, and that's it. That, to me, we're going to get to the Thunder part now.
Yes.
I love the resolve that they showed. It wasn't Steph, and it wasn't Draymond on the court, but it's still the Warriors. It's in their building. They're coming back, and you're like, what's going on? A lot of young teams could have faltered in that moment, and they didn't. They just kept doing their thing. They kept going through their process on offense. They kept going through their process on defense. I really liked what I saw because we've seen so many times the Warriors storm back in the third quarter and then go ahead and win the game. I know there was no Steph. I know Klay had an off-shooting night. No Draymond Green, but still, I like the resolve that I saw from Oklahoma City.
And I'll use another word. Again, I use this to talk about Golden State. To me, it's spirit. I love the spirit of this Thunder team. I would say it's one of my favorites of the entire NBA because
top 5 spirit team. Sure.
What's that? Yeah, top 5 spirit, man. They play a connected brand of basketball. They're weird. They have roll out lineups that you're kind of like, okay, what's going on? Who's the center and who's the point guard?
Right. There was a lineup where you had like Kenrich Williams at center. You had Jalen Williams bringing the ball up as the point guard and just saying, I'm just going to take it right down the throat of the Warriors defense. Yeah. Totally weird, but fun.
You got all these weird combinations, and then you have these guys who, we just talked about Golden State's others, the guys that are filling in the gaps, but you look at Isaiah Joe tonight, has a career night, 7 of 7 from the three-point line. A lot of that, in the fourth quarter. You look at Cason Wallace, who's been looking really good. They just have all these guys that they plug in and seem to get something out of because they're funky and they play together and they almost remind you of a college team. They remind you of like this college team that has some freshmen and have some seniors and they're all excited and they're all friends and it feels like they're going to go out for burgers and shakes afterwards.
It's a great comp. I love it. The one thing I did that kind of evened the playing field in this one, the Thunder are the second worst defensive rebounding team in the league by defensive rebounding rate, and the Warriors are actually one of the better offensive rebounding teams. And I have a Warriors theory that they don't have like good offensive rebounders on the team necessarily, but because they're so used to rebounding off of like those long shots that they're like they position themselves specifically in spots where they're going to get those offensive rebounds, not like the normal offensive rebound. We saw that was a big, thing for them in their finals run a couple years ago.
I would add one more piece of this though. It's also the movement. Like if you can stand still and watch a shot go up and box out, like, okay, you're going to grab the defensive rebound. But if you're scrambling all over the court, and you don't know where the shot's coming from and the ball's bouncing around, you're not in position to rebound and you're flying around and then it's a free for all. But of course you don't have that when you don't have Steph and to a lesser extent Draymond to stir the pot.
They did get a bunch of offensive rebounds in this one. 20 offensive rebounds for them in this game. That's a lot. And that's probably saying more about the Thunder's inability to get defensive rebounders. They also missed a lot of shots, which is always helpful if you get more chances. So what did the Thunder shoot in this game? It felt like really, 50.6%. Then that was about 10 percentage points better than Golden State. So yeah, all of that adds up. But that was the only thing that I think even the playing field there in that third quarter, Warriors were just scoring off a bunch of those offensive rebounds. The Thunder need to clean that up. That's been an issue for them all season long, but they know that. I don't need to tell them that. But overall, impressed with the Thunder.
Here's another thing that I think is unique to the Thunder this year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is their best player. Yes. And I think last year he was their best player every game that they won. And probably their best player in 90% of the games that they lost. I don't think that's true anymore. He's their best player. But guys like Jalen Williams can step in and be the best guy for a half. And Giddey can be the best guy for a half. And there's just other guys that can go in and make plays and do positive things. Micic tonight, I thought, had a good game, for him. So they just now are less reliant on Shai to be spectacular. And I think that's probably a good thing in the long run.
Your Denver Nuggets are 9-2 at the top of the West. The Dallas Mavericks right behind them at 9-3. Minnesota 8-3. And the Thunder 8-4. And the next team is the Houston Rockets at 6-3. The Warriors are at 6-7. They've lost 5 in a row, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get any easier anytime soon.
Free falling. They're in the Clipper zone at the moment.
Too early for teams to be splitting away, but it kind of start. It's too early. That's all.
It's too early.
It's too early. Okay.
They're 8-4, so they fall to 8-5, or if they climb to 9-4, it's such a big difference.
Too early.
Yeah, it's a little too early. But I will say this: you look at Denver, Dallas, Minnesota. They've been at the top all year long. Houston's kind of been there for a while now.
Our Minnesota Timberwolves, Adam. Our Minnesota Timberwolves.
Our Minnesota Timberwolves. I will say this. Actually, here's the interesting thing about the standings. The Nuggets are the incumbents. They're the reigning NBA champs. Dallas has been there before under a different iteration, but if we call this Lucas team, they've been there before. Sure. Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Houston Rockets, Sacramento. This is just all new guard. The new guard is at the top of the West right now, and the teams that are down below there are the LeBron's Lakers, Steph's Warriors, KD's Suns, Kawhi's Clippers. Like, those are the teams that are outside right now looking up at all these young pups. It'll probably blend as the season goes on to some degree, but I do think that we are in the midst of a little bit of a generational shift in the Western Conference.
It's a great call, and this season has been a lot of fun, and there's been a lot of great high-quality players making high-quality impacts, some of which have been a little bit harder to quantify than others. We talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and if they're going to score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 25 times on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. With the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James plus Taylor Swift's boyfriend at 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks a daily the #1 daily fantasy sports app. For those moments while you're waiting for the game to start, open up the app, check out the options, make your picks, and put your skills to the test and enjoy a game with a little bit more spice. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account. This basketball and football season with PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets hurt. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA to use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA or use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. It's Friday, which means it's time to count down to the weekend. What do you have for us today, Adam?
Well, you know, we're early in the year, and in the offseason, everybody likes to do player rankings. Where do guys rank 1 through 100, 1 through 500, whatever it is? Who's the top 10? And there's always a couple players that are just like, man, I don't know how to quantify this guy. He belongs both higher and lower, depending on what you look at it. So I got the guys who are most difficult to quantify just based where their value is.
And I like how you framed this to us before we started recording, the Jimmy Butler All-Stars.
The Jimmy Butler All-Star. I mean, of course, the Jimmy Butler All-Stars. I have a couple honorable mentions this week.
Okay.
And I'm going to throw those at you real quick. I got Julius Randle. He's a guy that is both like, you know, he's a star, but sometimes he's not a star. I don't know. Can you build a championship team around him?
No.
Well, so there you go. Maybe he's easier to quantify for you. I've got Russell Westbrook. Westbrook, man. I mean, this would have been the Russell Westbrook All-Stars 10 years ago. Now maybe it's a little easier to quantify, but still great player. Hard to build around though. Kind of hard to know where he belongs into another
Feels like
system.
the Clippers agree with you because they're like, we need James Harden. And Russell Westbrook's like, do you?
Is that right? Jeremy Grant. I feel like Jeremy Grant is almost this other all-star where we're like, man, that guy's so skilled. He's always on bad teams and seems to make no impact.
I feel like Jeremy Grant has played in a different league for 4 years. You know what I mean? Like he hasn't really been part of the real NBA action for basically since he left Denver, right? It's like every time he's doing stuff over here.
And easily, you know, you got Dame on the Blazers. You're like, oh man, that's a good. It didn't make any difference. I don't know. He's hard to quantify, but he's clearly a good player.
Yes.
And then I have Trae Young. Went to the Eastern Conference Finals, led a team to the Eastern Conference Finals, beat Joel Embiid's team in a playoffs. He has some big time thing, but at the same time, I think you look at him and you go, okay, he can dominate a game. You look at the numbers. Would you pick him to build your team? I don't know. He's hard to quantify. Is he a top 15 player? Statistically, he might be, but I don't. Does anybody really think he's that? He's hard to quantify.
I agree with all of those.
Which going to make this list even better. The top five here. Number 5, DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan has one of the prettiest games in the NBA. Best footwork. Incredible player. Incredible. How is he on such bad teams? And it seems like you almost, you know, obviously Toronto trades him away. They win a title. They get Kawhi. We understand that one. But you look at DeMar, he could dominate any individual matchup. Scariest guy. Terrible Chicago team, cornerstone of it. I don't know. He's a weird one.
His impact ultimately for his career, I know we're talking about like this season right now, but his career impact is going to be very similar to like Vince Carter's. Like their games are totally different. Yeah. But in terms of like what they mean to the next generation, like you talk to DeMar DeRozan's generation, or probably a generation younger, a little bit younger, and they say they always have Vince Carter in like their top 10 players ever, like their favorite players. DeMar DeRozan is going to be very similar to that, I think, for this generation. You talk to players right now, and they all love watching DeMar DeRozan, but that not like even Toronto, San Antonio, Chicago, it hasn't exactly led to wins. So his impact is sort of like a different impact than an on the court W's type.
And everybody could use a player who can get a bucket and this or that, but yet nobody's talking about, ooh, is DeMar DeRozan available?
Right.
Chicago, they're tearing it down. Like no contender feels they're one DeMar DeRozan away. It's very hard to quantify him. The next one is a weird one. This one almost doesn't belong on the list, but Zion Williamson.
Zion, he's on here.
What's that?
It's a shame that he's on here.
It is a shame, but I'm telling you, I can't tell how valuable he is, in part because of people will always say, well, if he plays, but at this point, we kind of know he doesn't play very much. And when he does, he's pretty dominant, but is he a good culture fit? Like what, I don't know what he is. He might be a great player that is just always limiting. Maybe he's a great player that's just in a bad situation. He's just so hard to quantify right now. He is so talented that every team in the league should be watching New Orleans and going, is he going to be available this year? Is this the year you give up? Because we'll pounce the way we pounced on Anthony Davis. Everybody wanted Anthony Davis. But I kind of feel like that's not the case with Zion. I think everyone kind of looks and goes, I don't know.
Well, we have the sample size of the Pelicans being very good and winning a lot of games when Zion was healthy, and that's just not really the case right now. And I think, and there's all the offseason drama going on with him. I think people are like, what's going on? Like, if we really opened up the hood on that, are we going to find some stuff that we didn't want to see? Is there even an engine in there anymore?
Right.
Like, I think that might be the concern there.
The top three, though, I think are all good and less controversial. They're less about these other things. They're more just about the value they bring to the basketball court. Number 3, we just saw him getting chokeholded by Draymond Green. Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is a multi-time Defensive Player of the Year winner. He is incredible. He anchors some of the top defense. Every year he's on one of the top defenses in the NBA, and he's anchoring it. He's lost some high-profile matchups in the playoffs where I think people expect it, and then he always gets blamed for it. It's Rudy's fault. You can't win with Rudy. And I watch him and I go, I don't know, man. Has he ever been on a team that really should have won? Has he actually underperformed expectations? And he gets played off the court by Nikola Jokic and Steph Curry. Guess what? Everyone does. So I look at Rudy Gobert and I go, I think he might actually be an elite piece of a championship team under everybody's noses, and yet everybody looks at him as if he's some kind of gimmick.
He's Ben Wallace without the rings, right? If Ben Wallace didn't have the rings, people talk about him a lot differently. And I'm with you. I've always thought that, look, he was sort of the antithesis of like James Harden for a long time. He was polarizing because of what he couldn't do and wasn't looked at but Harden for years was a walking top 5 offensive rating, right? Like your team would just be that. And with Gobert, and it looks like even now, even though there was a little bit of a drop off last year, you put Gobert in the middle of your defense, you're top 5 in defensive rating. And so I'm with you on that. Yeah. And I know the CEO of this company is asking us to talk about the
That's not why I did it. It's not why I did it.
We didn't mention those.
Number 2, Jamal Murray.
You had to have a Denver Nugget in here.
I had to. Come on. Jamal Murray
hurt right now. So
he is hurt right now. And even when he wasn't hurt, what's he averaging this year? 20 points. Pretty good shooting, 6 assists. Good numbers. Those are not all-star numbers. Those are not superstar numbers. That's not NBA champion rating, NBA champion numbers. Those are just good numbers. And yet, how many guys would you take him over? If you had one game 7 of the NBA Finals, you have to pick a guy. How many guys are getting picked ahead of him? Maybe 10? Maybe 10 before you go, no, that's a guy that's showing up in that game. He's an all-time playoff riser. He has an incredible skill set. He just seems to never show it in the regular season.
Yeah, he's sort of the guard version of the guy that we were talking about earlier. And I think the thing with Jamal Murray, though, is he's a very clear number 2. He's a very good player, but he's a very clear number 2. And I feel like people just skip over the number 2s a lot and when they're thinking about it. And it's a detriment to him because he's also one of my favorite players in the league to watch. He just he also happens to play with maybe the favorite league pass guy in the league in Nikola Jokic. So it's almost like he's in the shadow of this other guy. I don't know. And it's like this who's probably the best player in the NBA. So I get it.
Covering Denver, we've been saying it's the year of Jamal. This is his breakout year where everybody sees how good he is. And then even before he got injured, it just wasn't the case. And now he's injured. And you just look at it and go, I don't know, man. If I were betting at this moment, I would bet that Jamal averages about 21, 22 points a game. Kind of has a regular year for him. And then it comes to the playoffs, he's going to murder everyone. I would bet on both of those things. What did we call this? The Jimmy Butler All-Stars?
Yes.
So guess who's number 1?
Is it Jimmy Butler?
Nikola Jokic. No, I'm kidding. It's Jimmy Butler. Of course, Jimmy Butler. Because while Jamal Murray, there might be 10 guys you take in a game 7. I think there's probably only like 3 or 4 before Jimmy Butler. If you say it's game 7, it's about to get ugly. It's about to get nasty. You break his skill set down. Is he a great shooter? Not really. Pick and roll. I mean, he's a good player. He's good at everything. He's good. But if you just say, hey, you need to make a play in this moment, he's the ultimate playmaker, toughest guy on the court, baddest dude on the court. And yet I don't know if he's that good, but he's also awesome. It's so weird, man.
His greatest skill set, if you ask him, is that he just outworks everybody. He said that that's his best skill. I would argue that that's not his best skill. I think it's probably his second best skill. His best skill is the things that he doesn't do. He doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't foul.
Right.
And when you talk about like the hardest players whose impact it's hardest to measure here, you talk about a guy like Jokic, for example, who's always in the top of the VORPs and the EBPMs and the box plus minuses and all these things. Jimmy Butler's always like right there. You know, he's always like in a top 5, even if his stats, like the thing with Jokic and Embiid and these guys who are always up there too, that they're also averaging 30 points a game. Jimmy Butler doesn't do that. His stats are like 23, 6, and 6 every year, but his efficiency is really high and his impact on the court is really high because he just doesn't make mistakes. And that stuff is a lot harder. Like what's not there is hard to measure versus what is there. So I love that you have Jimmy Butler as number 1. And I have thought about that exact framing you said, guys that you would take in a game 7. There's only 3 guys I would take in the same realm as Jimmy Butler in the entire NBA. And it's in no particular order. Steph, Jokic, LeBron, and Jimmy Butler. Those are the 4, and it's everybody. It's a steep drop-off after that to everybody else. There's other guys who would be great, but those are my top 4 guys that I want in a foxhole.
I'm telling you, so when is this matchup? I got to look at this. I got to look and see. When do the Heat end up playing the Bucks? It's got to be coming up in the in-season tournament. Is it next Tuesday or next Friday? Let's find out together here. It's not until the 28th. Is that right? I didn't know that the in-season tournament went that long.
It does. I think that's the last week, and then the first week of December is the.
The NBA knew what they were doing when they set the schedule. They made that the final game. It's TNT.
Beautiful.
There's a really good chance that those 2 teams are going to be fighting for a ticket to go to the in-season tournament, and I just love it, man. Like, I'm taking Miami.
I love it. I love that we came out of this saying that Miami's going to win the in-season tournament. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever it is that you get your podcasts. The show is going to be back on Monday with the biggest stories from the NBA weekend. Until next Friday, you can find me over at Locked On Heat and Adams over at Locked On Nuggets. For your next listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming.